Okay, let's unpack this. Because the moment you woke up this morning and checked your phone, you didn't just look at the world. You looked at a world that was engineered.
Right, mathematically engineered.
Exactly.
Right.
Mathematically engineered to make you feel a very specific way. And we all kind of have this baseline assumption when we open up a social media app. It feels like we're looking through, I don't know, a clear glass window at a neutral stream of what is happening right now.
Yeah, we operate under this persistent illusion of neutrality because the timeline updates instantly. It borrows the aesthetic of raw reality.
But it's not raw reality at all. You're actually looking at a highly customized display screen, and a very distant landlord holds the remote control.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, every single item you scroll past has already won this silent algorithmic auction for your attention.
Which brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We really want to get into a serious, frankly urgent reflection on who exactly controls that auction, and more importantly, what kind of informational life that control creates for you.
Right. And to guide this discussion, we're going to be unpacking a really fascinating piece of work. It's paper 3 of the IQ-MQ space series by Levny Moten.
From N5 Digital, right?
Exactly, N5 Digital. And the paper is titled The IQ-MQ Filter, Toward a User-Owned Adaptive Layer Between Platform and Timeline. We're also drawing from a system diagram they provided that actually maps out the physical architecture of this whole proposal.
And the central theme here is just profound. The question isn't really if your feed is filtered anymore. Obviously it is. The real question is whether that filtering remains hidden and platform-owned, or whether it becomes visible, adjustable, and genuinely owned by you.
Yeah, and what I love about this paper is that it sits right at this fascinating boundary. It's part philosophy, part civic design, and part practical system architecture.
It's not just complaining about algorithms.
No, not at all. It moves way past the usual complaints and proposes a tangible structural solution. But I think to understand that solution, we first have to fully define the structural problem we're all living inside of today.
Right, so let's look at the tools these platforms actually give us right now. You can block someone, you can mute certain words, you can build a private list.
The standard toolkit.
Yeah, the standard toolkit. But relying on those feels a bit like trying to win at a rigged casino by just, I don't know, choosing a different slot machine.
That is exactly what it is. You have the illusion of choice. It's a very superficial control over which specific symbols flash in front of your face.
But the house still owns the underlying math of the floor.
And that underlying math is optimizing for engagement, retention, and above all, emotional capture. Because informational order is never neutral.
Never.
Right. So when an environment consistently rewards performative aggression or manipulative emotionality and this kind of shallow certainty, it doesn't just waste your time. It actually acts as a training mechanism.
It teaches you a completely distorted model of social reality. So the usual fixes we try to use, like content moderation or fact-checking labels or your personal block lists, they all fail because the deeper amplification engine is still entirely opaque.
Yeah, the platform's amplification engine still dictates the overall environment.
It's like living in a house where someone else controls the windows. You can close the blinds on specific views you hate, maybe block out a neighbor's yard, but the landlord is still deciding which neighborhood the house is parked in every morning.
I really like that analogy because what's fascinating here is how the current setup treats you. It treats the user purely as a passive target for extraction. You aren't a co-author of your environment at all.
Right, just a resource to be mined.
Right.
And that passive extraction is the exact dynamic this paper is trying to dismantle with this IQ-MQ filter. But we should probably establish right away what this thing is not.
Oh, absolutely. The author heavily emphasizes this. This is not a censorship engine.
Right.
It is not a moralizing force, and it is absolutely not some universal state-imposed social credit system that assigns a permanent rating to human beings.
Thank goodness, because the moment people hear intellectual quality and moral quality filters, I mean, the dystopian alarm bells start ringing immediately.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Because if a centralized authority is deciding what is moral, well, that's just authoritarianism with better branding.
Exactly. Which is why the architecture designates this as a user-owned adaptive layer. So instead of a block list, it operates more like a personal lens, mediating prominence, delay, and clustering.
It just changes what rises to the top of your feed and what recedes. And crucially, the unit of judgment the system uses is the post in context, rather than just universally banning or approving an author.
Wait, let's break down that mechanism. Because Evaluating the post in context implies it's looking way past just the raw text of a tweet or something.
Yes, it has to map the relationships around the text. It evaluates several layers simultaneously, so it looks at the individual post, but also the author's broader historical pattern, the immediate conversational thread it belongs to, and the larger topic cluster.
Okay, can you give an example of how that actually works in practice?
Sure. Imagine a breaking news scenario, say a natural disaster. You might have a historically noisy, hyper-partisan account that just happens to be on the ground, posting a vital, unedited video of a bridge collapse.
Right.
Under a crude block list or a basic reputation score,
Mm.
the system suppresses that crucial information because the author is generally deemed low quality.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But the IQMQ filter evaluates that specific post within its context. It sees the breaking news topic cluster, identifies the high evidence density of the raw video, and elevates it to your feed, despite the author's usual bad behavior.
I mean, I definitely see the value in that, but I have to push back a little on the logistics here. If a user-owned app is calculating the context of the thread and analyzing the author's history and mapping the topic cluster and parsing the specific text for every single post as I'm physically
The
scrolling,
lag would be unbearable.
unbearable. I mean, a social feed has to render instantly.
Right.
If my phone is conducting a deep behavioral analysis of a meme before it loads the image, the user experience is just dead on arrival.
Yeah, and the paper actually anticipates this exact bottleneck. It outlines a specific latency architecture to solve it. The mechanism relies on separating background signal caching from live foreground rendering.
Okay, so it's doing the heavy lifting ahead of time.
Exactly. The system does not calculate an author's 5-year history or the persistence of a news cycle in the exact millisecond your thumb swipes the glass.
It precompiles the heavy data.
Right. It continuously downloads and updates metadata digests in the background. Things like author liability or topic volatility. They're stored and incrementally adjusted while your phone is just sitting in your pocket.
So the live real-time decision, like the actual rendering of the feed, only draws on that pre-stored contextual database to evaluate the fresh post.
You've got it. The computational heavy lifting is decoupled from the user interface, which means richer judgment doesn't have to mean intolerable delay.
Okay, so the math works.
Huh.
But that brings us to the human element of actually steering this machinery. I mean, if I'm the one controlling this adaptive layer, I need a way to communicate my preferences to it. And I definitely do not want to open my app and stare at an airplane cockpit of dials labeled civility or nuance and evidence density. I'm not a data scientist.
Most people aren't. And they'll simply abandon a tool that requires constant granular calibration. The paper warns against exactly this. They call it parameter overload.
Right. Giving a user 100 different switches just reproduces the problem of hidden complexity, just in a different, totally unusable form.
Exactly. So the solution provided in the system diagram is a spatial user interface. It essentially replaces sliders with a quadrant map.
So you have intellectual quality IQ on one axis and moral quality MQ on the other. So instead of tuning a radio dial, I'm navigating a physical space.
You're just dropping a pin. You literally move a target point on this two-dimensional map into the region of informational quality you want to inhabit. And that spatial target is the first of 3 main user-facing controls.
Okay, and the second control is porosity, right? Which acts kind of like a radio around that pin.
Yeah, exactly like a radius.
So if I drop my pin in the high IQ, high MQ quadrant, the porosity defines how far I'm willing to walk from that center. A narrow aperture gives me a highly concentrated feed that perfectly matches my target, but a wider aperture allows more spillover from adjacent zones.
That radius analogy captures the mechanics perfectly. And then the third core control is challenge exposure.
Which feels like a really necessary safeguard, because
Yeah.
if I lock down my radius and set my porosity to 0 so I only see content that perfectly aligns with my dropped pin, I'm fundamentally just building myself a brand new echo chamber.
Right. It might be a very high-quality, polite echo chamber, but it still totally isolates you from broader reality.
Exactly. So challenge exposure dictates how much high-quality content from outside your preferred spatial zone is deliberately allowed into your timeline.
Yes. And notice how elegant the UI remains. You really only manipulate 3 variables: the target pin, the porosity radius, and the challenge rate.
But wait, where do the other variables live? Earlier, we talked about the system detecting manipulative emotionality or evidence density. If I'm not tuning those on my dashboard, how is the lens actually measuring them?
They function as secondary internal signals that help the system read the terrain. So the algorithm looks for semantic and structural markers.
Like what kind of markers?
Well, manipulative emotionality often presents through specific linguistic patterns, heavy use of outgroup derogation, predictable adverbs of outrage, or even just a high ratio of adjectives to verifiable
Oh,
nouns.
that makes sense. And evidence density.
Evidence density can be measured by the presence of external links to primary sources or the structural complexity of an argument. These signals operate quietly in the background, weighting the post so the spatial map functions accurately without cluttering up your screen.
Okay, but this brings up a massive behavioral vulnerability. In behavioral economics, we talk constantly about stated preferences versus revealed
Right,
preferences.
the classic divide.
Yeah. My stated preference, the pin I dropped on the map, says I want high quality, nuanced geopolitical analysis. But it's 2 a.m., I had a terrible day, my willpower's totally gone, and I start doom scrolling.
We've all been there.
Right. My revealed preference in that moment is clicking on the lowest quality, rage-baiting, performative garbage I can find. I'm basically just staring at a digital car crash.
And current platforms totally fail to make the distinction between those two states. Their algorithms only measure time on screen and click-through rates. They see you pause at the car crash, and their underlying math immediately starts optimizing to feed you more car crashes.
It's actively rewriting my informational environment based on a temporary moment of weakness. I'd hate that. So how does a user-owned filter know not to take my 2 a.m. doom scrolling as a permanent change in my identity?
The paper addresses this explicitly, noting a foundational truth of human nature. Curiosity is not endorsement, and rage reading is not approval. To handle this, the filter employs a two-layered architecture governed by a mathematical principle called hysteresis.
Hysteresis. Okay, how does that work?
So the first layer is your declared preference, the pin you dropped. That is treated as stable and authoritative. The second layer is adaptive calibration. Hysteresis essentially means the system has a very long memory and incredibly slow adaptation.
Oh, I see. Think of hysteresis kind of like a heavy spinning flywheel. A quick tap at 2 a.m. doesn't have nearly enough kinetic energy to spin this massive wheel in an entirely new direction.
Exactly. The math acts as a shock absorber. If your baseline is set at a specific high-quality coordinate, an aberrant interaction only applies a fractional decaying weight to the algorithm.
So it would require sustained, repeated behavior over weeks to actually move my center of gravity.
Yes. Furthermore, explicit actions like manually saving a post or actively overriding a filter carry massive algorithmic weight. Passive actions, like merely dwelling on a video for 10 seconds, carry negligible weight.
Which protects me from my own worst impulses. It basically elevates my conscious intellect over my subconscious lizard brain.
And the paper frames this damping mechanism not just as some technical luxury, but as a constitutional protection against the noise of human emotion. It ensures your conscious direction remains primary and the machine's interpretation remains deeply restrained.
I love that. But let's push the logic of this protection to its extreme. If we build a system that is so effective at filtering out manipulative outrage and outgroup derogation and chaotic noise, don't we risk creating a totally sanitized, fake world?
That is a very real danger.
Right. Because if I mute all the yelling, reality doesn't stop being violent and contested. Am I just building a digital gated community where I hide from the ugly parts of human existence?
The author identifies this exact risk and terms it an informational greenhouse. It's an environment that is calm and orderly, but intellectually weak and completely false. A humane filter cannot counterfeit serenity by suppressing harsh realities.
So how does it handle that?
To prevent the greenhouse effect, the architect draws a hard, explicit distinction between intensity and distortion.
Which are two very different phenomena. I mean, war, systemic corruption, natural disasters, these are intense, high-energy, uncomfortable events. A system that hides a famine because the images are low vibration or unpleasant is actively blinding you.
Exactly. The target of the IQ-MQ filter is not strong feeling. It is not anti-conflict. The target is degraded informational form. It is anti-distortion.
Can you give an example of the difference?
Let's take the example of an escalating geopolitical conflict. A high-intensity, high-quality post might feature a verified journalist on the ground reporting on civilian casualties. It is brutal, emotional, and vital to see.
Right.
A distorted post about that same conflict might feature a pundit safely in a studio somewhere, using stylized outrage and dehumanizing rhetoric just to generate engagement off the tragedy, adding absolutely zero factual understanding.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The filter lets the harsh reality of the journalist pass through, but it demands a higher standard of interpretation, catching the pundit's distortion. It doesn't hide the world, it just clears the static so you can actually perceive the world.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this goes directly back to the challenge exposure function we discussed earlier. Personalization becomes actively dangerous when it converges too perfectly around your existing worldview.
So the challenge function deliberately injects credible arguments, unfamiliar cultural temperaments, and intelligent disagreement from outside your habitual center of gravity.
Exactly. Because the overarching goal of this civic design isn't to build a smoother private fantasy for you to escape into.
Hmm.
The goal is to dramatically improve the quality of your contact with public reality.
But if the ultimate goal is improving my contact with reality, then the platform inherently cannot be the entity that hosts this filter. I mean, the financial incentive of a social network is and always will be engagement and ad delivery,
Always.
which means if they own the IQMQ filter, they will eventually slowly degrade it, widening the porosity invisibly to keep me scrolling longer. The architecture physically has to live somewhere else.
The paper is adamant on this structural necessity. The filter must be realized as an independent user-side application layer.
Like a companion claim.
Yes, the platform sends the raw data hose, but your independent application parses, filters, and renders that data before it irradiates your eyeballs.
Because the profile this system builds, my precise spatial targets, my calibrated porosity, my threshold for challenge exposure, that is an incredibly intimate behavioral map. It is literally the shape of my cognition.
It is highly sensitive property.
Mm.
Therefore, the architecture demands local storage, strong privacy, and above all, portability.
Portability is huge.
It is. If a new social network launches tomorrow, or if an existing one degrades into unusability, you shouldn't be forced to start from zero. You should be able to unplug your IQMQ filter from platform A, plug it into platform B, and immediately have your high-quality, perfectly tuned environment applied to the new data stream.
This introduces a concept the author calls informational dignity. It operates on the same civic level as physical privacy or freedom of speech. Modern digital life sort of assumes that the massive corporation mediates reality, and you, the user, merely react to what is placed in front of you.
But owning your own filter reverses that power dynamic entirely. It establishes mediation freedom. You are declaring that your attention is your most valuable asset.
And the architecture of that attention is a legitimate domain of your own personal agency.
Moving from a hidden platform-extracted feed to a visible, user-owned informational environment represents a profound shift. It forces the algorithms to serve the user's stated intellectual goals rather than treating the user as a resource to be mined.
We are finally taking the remote control back from the landlord. It is a brilliant, urgent framework for reclaiming our minds. But as we wrap up this deep dive, it leaves me with one final provocative thought that I want to leave you, the listener, to mull over.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we've established how empowering this is for the individual. But if we do this, if everyone eventually adopts their own highly customized, portable IQMQ filters to navigate the internet, what happens to the concept of a shared cultural moment?
That's a great question.
If my feed is optimized for high IQ nuance and my neighbor's feed is optimized for something entirely different, does the unified public square shatter completely into millions of bespoke, incredibly high quality, but totally separate realities? And if so, without a centralized feed, how will we ever know what the rest of the world is truly looking at?